When the woman in the white dress stepped into my house, I thought she was lost. I never imagined she was here to take away everything I loved. That's how it began. Not with shouting, not with police or papers, just a quiet knock on a rainy evening, a pair of children's shoes still wet by the door, and a stranger standing where no stranger should ever stand. I remember the smell of lentil soup simmering on the stove. The twins, Ollie and Amina, were sitting on the floor, building towers out of wooden blocks. The clock on the wall ticked softly, steady, familiar, until that knock froze the world. When I opened the door, the woman smiled first. A polite smile, like you'd give to someone whose name you couldn't remember. "Assalamu alaikum," she said, her voice soft but sure. I'm here for my children." For a moment, I didn't understand. I thought she was lost. Maybe she lived nearby, maybe her kids were in the street. But then her eyes moved past me, past my shoulder, toward Ollie, who looked up and for the briefest second stopped breathing. And that's when my heart started to fall. I didn't speak, couldn't. I just stared at her. Her scarf was white silk, her clothes too neat for someone wandering in the rain. She had the kind of beauty that didn't try, tired eyes, but proud. She whispered again, "I'm their mother." Those words, they didn't make sense, because I was their mother, or at least I had been for the past 5 years. When the spoon slipped from my hand and hit the floor, the children flinched. I stepped aside, automatically, like my body obeyed her before my mind could. She stepped in, her shoes leaving little drops of water on my rug, her perfume mixing with the scent of lentils and rain. Where's Hamza?" she asked, looking around. The name hit me like a stone. Hamza. My son. For 5 years, I had spoken his name only in prayer. I should tell you how I got here, how a mother becomes a stranger in her own home. 5 years ago, Hamza had left for Karachi, chasing work after his father died. He'd promised to send for the family once he was settled. Then came the call. An accident. No survivors. I remember that morning like it was yesterday, the phone shaking in my hands, the neighbors coming in, the screaming, the smell of tea no one drank. A week later, 2 small children arrived at my door. His friend brought them from the city. He said their mother had run away after the accident. I didn't ask questions. Maybe I was too broken to. Ollie was 3, Amina barely 2. They didn't cry much. They just clung to me as if they already knew I was all they had. And from that day, I became mother again. We built our life slowly. Mornings smelled of porridge and damp uniforms. Afternoons were full of crayons, laughter, and the sound of Amina singing her ABCs wrong but proud. Nights were quieter. I'd sit by the window, sewing their torn socks, whispering their father's name to the stars. People in the village pitied me at first, then admired me. "She's strong," they said. "She's raising her son's children alone." And yes, I was proud. My wrinkles deepened, my hair grayed faster, but my house was alive again. The walls had laughter, and that was enough. Until that knock. Now she stood there, looking around like she owned the place. The curtains, the toys, the framed photo of Hamza I'd placed above the TV. Her eyes softened when she saw it. She said, "That's him. You kept his picture." Her voice cracked just slightly, and in that crack, I heard truth. This woman wasn't lying. My knees weakened. I managed to ask, "You said you're their mother?" She said yes, clutching her handbag like a weapon she didn't want to use. "Hamza, he's my husband." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. I saw Amina's face, confused, holding her doll tighter, and I felt something old and sharp stir inside me. I whispered, "He's dead. He's gone.
We buried. She shook her head. No, she said softly. He's alive, and he sent me to bring them home. The soup was burning. I could smell it. The lentils had caught at the bottom of the pot, a faint bitter smoke curling into the air, but I couldn't move. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. Hamza, older, tired, standing beside her, holding the twins. Alive. My son. My boy. Every cell in my body screamed with joy and confusion and betrayal all at once. He was alive, but he hadn't come home. He'd sent her. My hands trembled as I touched the photo. Where is he? I asked. She said, in Lahore, recovering. He had an injury, memory loss at first, but he remembers now. He remembers everything. Everything. The words sliced through me. If he remembered everything, why didn't he remember me? She sat down, without asking. The children watched her like strangers watch a magic trick, fascinated, afraid. She opened her arms. Ollie, Amina, come to Mama. No one moved. The only sound was the clock. Tick, tick, tick. Then Amina took one small step, and my heart broke. Ollie stayed frozen, eyes darting between us. He was older now, old enough to remember who changed his diapers, who held him through fever nights. He whispered, "But your grandma." The woman smiled, pained. "I'm your mother, sweetheart. Grandma took care of you when I couldn't." Her words were gentle, but they undid me. Every year I spent, every lullaby I sang, every scraped knee I bandaged, all shrunk into a footnote. That night, after she left, promising to come back with papers, I sat alone by the cold stove. The rain had stopped, but the silence was heavier than before. On the table lay her photo of Hamza, alive, changed, and the block tower Ollie had built earlier, now fallen over. I picked up one of the blocks and turned it in my hand. It still smelled faintly of Amina's crayon, and in that tiny scent, I realized what was about to happen. They were coming for my children, and I had no right, at least not on paper, to stop them. But I wasn't going to let go. Not yet. Not without a fight.
Morning used to be my favorite hour, the softest part of the day, when the house felt like a secret I had kept safe through the night. I would wake before Fajr, the kettle a small sigh on the stove, the metal tray cool beneath my palms as I set out 3 cups, 1 for me, 2 with extra sugar for the children. Ali liked his with a splash of milk, the foam catching on his top lip. Amina wanted hers the color of caramel, like Abu's, she would say, though she only knew her father's habits from the stories I told. I'd press my thumb onto the dates to make sure there were no hidden pits. Then the call to prayer would float through the thin morning air, gentle and certain, and I would feel held for a moment by something larger than worry. Our house was small, but it remembered how to hold laughter. The living room wall wore the children's height marks in pencil, the notches slanting too close together where Amina insisted she'd grown 2 inches in one night. The sofa sagged in the middle, but that dip was perfect for reading. We'd fold into it with picture books that smelled like old paper and apple shampoo. The window over the sink framed a stubborn bougainvillea that refused to bloom until the week school started, then exploded with pink as if to mock us for our routines. Routine was everything. Shoes lined by the door, lunches packed, wedges of omelet wrapped in roti, an orange carefully peeled so it pulled free in one spiraling ribbon. I stitched names into sweaters so no teacher would mistake what belonged to whom. I kept a jar of coins for the school van. I knew the driver's cough by sound alone. On Fridays, we went to the bakery after class, and the baker would say, "The mathematician and the singer," and slip 2 tiny sesame biscuits into my hand when the children weren't looking. I wore the same wool shawl I'd worn when Hamza was small. Dark brown, a little thin in places, the
the fringe tangled. The scent of mustard oil clung to it from winter nights when I rubbed it into the children's scalps until their shoulders unclenched and their foreheads grew heavy. Some nights, after they fell asleep, I'd stand in their doorway just to listen to the busy sound of their dreaming. It's an arrogant thing, perhaps, to believe that vigilance alone can hold off the world. But in those years, I did believe it. I had to. Neighbors learned our rhythms and folded themselves into the edges of them. Shazia from across the lane would send over a bowl of halim when she made too much. The imam's wife would set aside a book for Ali from the mosque library, dinosaurs or planets or engines, and slide it to me after Asr, like a secret. In the winter, the electric heater ticked as it cooled, a metal heart quieting. In the summer, the fan blades blurred above us, chopping the heat into manageable pieces. It was a simple life, but it was ours. The day after the white scarfed woman came, I tried to make that routine louder, as if repetition could prove ownership. I chopped onions until my eyes burned, kneaded dough with the ferocity of a soldier polishing boots. When I saw the children off at the gate, I pretended not to notice how Ali's hand lingered in mine a breath longer than usual, nor the way Amina kept turning to look at the street as if something might appear if she blinked enough times. A drizzle had rinsed the dust from the road. The world looked too clean, as if it were new, and I didn't trust it. Her name, when she returned, was Nadia. She said it like an apology, like it had been heavy in her mouth for too long. "My name is Nadia," she told the children, kneeling so her face would be level with theirs. "I've wanted to say it to you for years." She glanced at me then, and there was an ache in that glance, an ache that complicated the neat lines of anger I'd drawn overnight. She came with a box of mitai. "From your father," she said, and the children's eyes shone. She had a lawyer's card tucked into the edge of the box, the glossy rectangle winking each time the lid shifted. She set the card on the table. Careless or deliberate, I couldn't tell. I didn't touch it. I don't like to touch weapons I'm not ready to use. We made tea. We sat. She told a story in careful sentences. An accident, a hospital in Lahore, my son's skull like a cracked bowl and his memory spilled, a slow recovery, a longer confusion. She called me Appa for weeks, she said, a quick, sad smile. Then one morning he said my name and cried. When she reached for the cup, her blouse sleeve slid back and I saw the thin white seam of a scar on her wrist. Something old and tired flickered through me. Grief recognizes grief, even when it doesn't want to.
"Why didn't he come?" I asked. Not soft, not cruel, just a woman asking a question whose answer has no gentle version. "He tried," she said. "He wrote letters he tore up. He said his mother deserved a son who walked in, not one you had to carry. He said he couldn't come back empty-handed. He wanted..." She exhaled, the word unfinished. "He wanted to be worthy." There it was, a sentence that landed and didn't. I held it, and it crumbled. Worthy of what? Of me? Of fatherhood? Of the life we had already lived without him? She looked at the photo of Hamza on the wall. "Can I take this?" she asked. "Not now, later, for the children's room." The way she said "their room" made my throat tighten. In language, rooms belong to the future you build inside them. I smiled without my teeth and shook my head. "It stays." She nodded, and in that nod, I saw the first thin crack of war. After she left, I stood in the doorway long enough for my ankles to ache. The mitai sat on the table untouched, orange syrup staining the cardboard. The lawyer's card had gone. Whether she took it or the table swallowed it, I didn't know. My hands moved without instruction. I washed the cups twice, hung the dishcloth true, straightened the cushions as if they had misbehaved. Then I opened the window and let the air in, cool and a little sharp, the kind that wakes you even when you want to sleep. In the days that followed, she came often, never empty-handed. A new school notebook, a hair clip shaped like a silver leaf, a plastic car with wheels that lit when you pushed it hard. She brought a small sweater that fit Amina like she had measured her while I wasn't looking. I brought the receipt, she said, as if a receipt made the gift neutral, safe. I watched the children's faces, the instinct to delight, struggling with the loyalty to refuse. Children are not diplomats. Their eyes tell the truth before they know it is a weapon. Amina ran her fingers over the leaf clip and then set it back on the table, her jaw squaring the way her father's used to when he wanted to be brave. I began to notice small rearrangements. The day after Nadia admired the photo, I found it turned a fraction to the left. A week later, the little calendar on the refrigerator bore 2 dates circled in blue pen that wasn't mine. I told myself I just missed my own hand doing it. What does it mean to be in a house and feel your grip on its outline loosen, one tiny shift at a time? The first clue that had edges came from places that keep lists. At the clinic, the nurse said, "We updated the children's file. Good to have the mother's signature at last." She tapped the paper with a pink nail. She corrected the spelling of their surname. My chest went cold. "Who?" I asked, though I knew. "The mother," she repeated, with a nurse's finality, the kind that says, "The form is truth now." At school, the secretary slid a clipboard toward me. "We have your new number," she said. I didn't have a new number. She showed me the emergency contact sheet. My name had slipped to the second line. On the first, Nadia, with a Lahore address I'd never seen. The secretary had a practiced smile for complicated families. "It's good," she said, "when everyone coordinates." The word felt like a cough I couldn't clear. At home, I found the children's birth certificates in the tin box where I kept everything that mattered. Deeds, the 1 gold bangle my mother left me, vaccination cards, a photo of my husband holding newborn Hamza like he was too light to trust. I always tucked the papers in a stack, oldest below, newest above. Now the order was wrong. The edge of one certificate wore a fresh crease. I don't know if you've ever recognized a stranger's touch they didn't mean to leave, but the paper had it, a newness that wasn't mine. That night, while I grated ginger into honey for Amina's cough, Ali drew at the table. He is careful with lines, a boy who respects borders. His pencil made small, decisive sounds: roof, door, window, path. He added 2 stick figures, a woman and a man, with a smaller one in between. Outside the fence, he drew another figure under a slant of lines that could be rain or bars. He shaded the sky until the paper pilled. "Who's that outside?" I asked, light as I could make it. He didn't look up. "That's the grandma," he said. "She's waiting." My hand closed around the grater too hard, and a curl of ginger stuck to my palm. I told myself stories to hold back the flood. She's doing what any mother would. She is trying to knit herself back into a life that unraveled without her consent. Perhaps, if the world had broken me in the way it broke her, I might also circle names on a calendar like spells and adjust picture frames by a degree at a time to make the room tilt my way. But the second clue didn't ask for my compassion. It demanded my attention. 2 days later, the school called. "We received the withdrawal forms for Ali and Amina," the headmistress said. Her voice was kind in the way of women who have seen too many kinds of pain. "A transfer to Lahore? We need your confirmation." The room around me went silent in that heavy way before a glass slips off a counter. "I didn't sign any forms," I said. My voice surprised me, a steady river with rocks beneath. "You will not process a withdrawal," I added, "not without me." A pause. Paper moving. "The mother signed," she said gently, like someone placing a stone in my hand to see how much I can carry. "She also updated the custody notes. She stopped herself. The sound of her pen clicking was a small metronome for my heart.
I looked across the room. On the shelf, the tin box was closed, the latch shining like an eye. Above it, the photo of Hamza hung, solidly, still centered between the two nails that keep a frame from leaning toward any one person in particular. I thought of the small adjustments, the blue circles, the turned frame, the corrected surname. I thought of how a person can erase another person without using a single loud word, how they can rub at the outline of you until the pencil smudge becomes the page, and the page becomes the only record anyone reads. I'd told the headmistress, "Hold the files. No changes, please." The please cost me pride I didn't want to spend. "I'll be there in the morning." When I hung up, I felt the floor more firmly under my feet than I had in weeks. My hands, suddenly, were useful again. I pulled the tin box from the shelf, set it on the table, and clicked open the latch. I laid the papers out in rows like soldiers. Names, dates, signatures, stamps. All the quiet authorities that decide who we belong to. I set my thumb on my name and held it there until the print warmed, as if I could press myself into the ink deeper, as if persistence could be notarized. From the children's room, I heard Amina cough, then a little sigh, then silence. Ali turned in his sleep and called for a glass of water without waking. I went to them and tucked the blanket under their chins, the way I used to tuck it for Hamza when he was small and still believed that my hands alone could keep monsters at the foot of the bed. I stood there and made a quiet promise, not to the past where all my stories began, but to the morning that was coming, whether I begged or not. I promised I would not be erased. The morning I went to the school, the air had that thin, metallic cold that makes sound sharper. Every footstep felt like a decision. The headmistress was waiting in her small office, the same office where I'd first enrolled the twins, where their drawings still hung on the sideboard. She looked up from her papers, her eyes kind but tired. "Mrs. Rahman," she said softly, "I didn't expect you so early." I smiled, though it felt wrong on my face. I thought it best to come before anything else changes. She hesitated, then pushed the file toward me. "I'll let you see what was submitted." The file smelled faintly of ink and hand sanitizer. Inside were neat forms, printed from a computer. I traced the lines with my finger. Names, dates of birth, guardian details, all correct. Until the last section. Mother, Nadia Rahman. Relation of guardian, Mrs. F. Rahman. Grandmother. Legal custody, primary, mother. Secondary, grandmother. Temporary. Below that, Hamza's signature. My son's name, scrawled in black ink. It wasn't photocopied. It was real. I recognized the way his H slanted, the loop that never closed in his A. I'd watched him sign his school notebooks 100 times. There was no mistaking it. The headmistress must have seen the color drain from my face. "She sent this through the lawyer's office," she said gently. "We were told not to discuss details with either party until the transition date." "Transition?" I repeated, as if the word belonged to weather. "Yes," she said. "They're moving at the end of the month." I closed the folder. "Thank you." I don't remember walking home, only the feel of the wind pushing against my scarf, the sting in my throat when I tried to breathe. At home, the house was too clean, Nadia's habit, not mine. She'd been there that morning. The cushions were rearranged, the smell of rose spray hung in the air. On the dining table sat a new framed photograph, the twins in their school uniforms, standing beside Nadia. I didn't own that frame. My hand shook as I reached for it. A small sticker on the back read "Studio Bloom, Lahore." She'd already taken them for portraits, as if rewriting history was just another errand. I sank onto the sofa, holding the frame against my knees. My reflection in the glass was a blur. Then from the corner of the photo, I saw something else. The faint shadow of another hand on Amina's shoulder. Hamza's. He had been there. Alive. Present. And he hadn't called.
That night, I didn't cook. I couldn't stand the sound of boiling water or knives hitting the board. The children ate bread and jam without complaint. They sensed my silence, and children have a way of shrinking when adults turn to stone. After they slept, I opened the small drawer beside my bed, the one I never let anyone touch. Inside was a worn envelope, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting on it was my son's, from when he was 12. It said, "To Amy, for your hands that fix everything." I pulled the paper out. It was a school essay about the person I love most. He'd written about me, about how I never gave up on broken things, clocks, radios, people. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe I didn't know when something was meant to stay broken. I pressed the paper against my chest and wept, quietly, into the dark. 2 days later, the lawyer came, a man with a polite face and a voice that could flatten a mountain. He handed me a letter. "This is an official custody notice, Mrs. Rahman. The children will transition to full care under their biological parents within 30 days. You're welcome to visit, of course, but the primary household will be in Lahore." Lahore, I repeated. The word felt foreign now. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Rahman, your son, wants this to go smoothly. He's grateful for everything you've done." "Grateful?" I whispered. "Yes," he said, shuffling papers. "He even asked that we ensure your name remains listed as guardian emeritus." Guardian emeritus, like I was some retired school teacher. I stared at the seal on the document. Official, neat, final. Then I looked up at him. "Tell my son," I said, my voice steady now, "that his children already have 2 homes, one built of walls, one of memories. Let's see which one stands longer." The next evening, I waited for them to come. When Hamza finally appeared, he looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, paler, as if life had taken bites out of him. He wore a blue shirt that didn't fit his shoulders anymore. He stood in the doorway like a stranger rehearsing how to speak. "Ami." The sound of that word nearly undone me. I didn't rise. "You're alive," I said, "and you didn't think I needed to know?" His jaw tightened. "I was going to come." "When?" I asked. "After she finished moving my grandchildren out of my life?" He stepped inside, eyes flicking around the room, at the photos, the books, the toys. "You raised them well," he said quietly. "Better than I could have. Then why take them away?" He looked down. "Because they're confused. They need their parents." "They need love," I said. "They already have that here." He rubbed his temples like my voice was a noise he couldn't bear. "Nadia has waited 5 years. She lost everything too. And what did I lose, Hamza? Do you know how many nights I've begged Allah to bring you back? Do you know what it's like to look into their faces and see yours and still not have you?" He didn't answer. Tears stood in his eyes, but they were useless, like rain after a flood. Finally, he said, "I just want peace, Ami." I nodded slowly. "Peace," I said. "Yes, but peace isn't always right." That night, after they left, I tore the letter into small pieces and burned it in a clay bowl. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to smoke that smelled faintly of ink and betrayal. I whispered into the smoke, "You may have law, but I have truth." The next morning, I began to plan. I went to the school first, then the community center, then the local welfare office. I collected copies of every document that had my name, my address, my care listed for the children. I spoke to neighbors who had known me since the day I arrived. I gathered every note from teachers, every photograph from school functions, every vaccination record signed under my guardianship. By evening, I had a file thicker than the lawyer's letter. When I looked at it spread across the table, it wasn't just paper. It was proof of a life lived. Proof that motherhood is not declared by documents, by daily devotion. I wasn't fighting to win. I was fighting not to disappear. As I closed the folder, Amina came into the room, sleepy-eyed, her small hand dragging her blanket. "Grandma, are we going to Lahore?" I looked at her soft hair, her tired face, and swallowed hard. "Do you want to go?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't know," she said. "I like when Mama comes, but when she's here, you look sad." Her honesty was a knife wrapped in kindness. I pulled her into my lap and kissed her forehead. "Sometimes," I said, "people love you in different directions. You just have to remember who held you steady." She nodded against my chest, already drifting back to sleep.
As I carried her back to bed, the night air smelled of rain again, like the evening it all began. Only this time, I wasn't afraid of the storm.
The next morning, I woke before the call to prayer. The world outside was still grey, like it hadn't decided whether to start over or stay asleep. I wrapped my shawl around me, made wudu, and sat by the window, with my files spread out across the table. Every page told a story. Not the kind of story people write in fancy words, but the kind that lives in grease stains and pencil marks. Receipts from the school uniform shop, notes from the pediatrician signed Guardian, Mrs. F. Rahman, photographs from parent meetings where I stood between Ali and Amina, their fingers wrapped around my dupatta. This was my evidence, not just for court, but for truth itself. By sunrise, I was already outside the lawyer's office, the same man who'd brought me the custody letter. He looked surprised to see me. Mrs. Rahman, I didn't expect. I'm here to file a petition, I interrupted, for continued guardianship. He blinked. You realize that's complicated. The biological parents are not the only ones who raised them. My voice came out steadier than I expected. They had 5 years with me, 5 years when no one else fed them or held them through a fever or taught them their first prayers. That must count for something. He leaned back, studying me, perhaps realizing I wasn't another grieving old woman. You'll need proof of psychological attachment, testimonies, records, evidence that removing them would harm them. I have all that, I said, sliding the file across his desk. He hesitated before opening it. You understand, he said carefully, the odds aren't in your favor. Courts usually side with the biological parents. I'm not asking for favor, I'm asking for fairness. He skimmed the documents, then exhaled. You have a case, he admitted. We'll request a temporary stay on relocation until the hearing, but it may create tension in the family. I almost laughed. Tension? That arrived the day my son stopped calling me Ammi. That night, I called Hamza. He didn't pick up the first time, or the second, but on the third ring, his voice came, rough, tired. Ammi, I'm taking you to court, I said quietly. Silence. Then, I expected that. Then expect this too. I'm not doing it to win. I'm doing it so one day, when those children are old enough to ask where they came from, there will be an official record that says, someone fought for them. I could hear him breathing. You don't need to fight, he said softly. No one's taking them away. They already are, I whispered. Not from my house, from my name. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm without an umbrella. Everywhere I went, people spoke softly around me, as if my life had become fragile glass. But I wasn't fragile, I was awake. The community turned into a courtroom of whispers. Some supported me, mothers who understood that love doesn't expire when papers say it should. Others murmured that I was selfish, clinging to children who needed their parents. But no one had been there at 2 a.m. when Amina couldn't breathe from fever and I carried her to the clinic barefoot. No one had seen the way Ali called me Ammi for months before I corrected him, telling him I was Dadi and then cried in the kitchen where he couldn't see. They only saw the end, not the 1,000 quiet beginnings that made it. When the first court date arrived, I wore my plainest clothes, a beige shawl ironed twice. Nadia came in a crisp blue outfit, her eyes ringed with sleeplessness but steady. Hamza sat beside her, hands folded tight. He didn't look at me.
The judge was a woman, calm, intelligent eyes, a voice that carried authority like it had practice. She looked through the files, then at me. You are the paternal grandmother? Yes, Your Honor. And you raised the children for 5 years without contact from either parent? Yes. Nadia shifted in her seat. We thought she was dead, I said, before she could speak. The judge raised a hand. One at a time. Nadia's voice trembled. He lost his memory, and I was alone. I didn't even know where the children were taken. When I found them, I just wanted to be their mother again. I looked at her, and for the first time, I saw the truth in her tears. She wasn't my enemy. She was just another woman fighting to hold her family together. The judge nodded. "And you," she said to me, "what do you want from this petition?" I took a deep breath. "Recognition," I said. "I'm not here to take the children away. I just want it written, somewhere official, that for those years, I was their mother in everything but name, that I loved them, that they loved me. That matters." The courtroom fell silent. Even the ceiling fan seemed to stop. The judge looked down, then slowly nodded. "Very well," she said. "I will consider temporary shared custody until the final decision." Outside the courthouse, Nadia approached me. For a moment, we just stood there, two women who had both mothered the same children in different ways. She said, "I didn't mean to erase you." Her eyes glistened. "I was just scared they'd forget me." I sighed. I was scared of the same thing. She looked down at her hands. "Maybe they don't have to forget either of us." It was the first time she said us. Over the next few weeks, the arrangement began. Weekends with me, weekdays in Lahore. The house felt different now, quieter, but not empty. Every Friday evening when they arrived, Amina would run through the door shouting, "Dadi, your soup!" because she knew I'd always be cooking the same dish when they came. Ali would help me fold the laundry, telling me stories about school, about his new life. Sometimes they'd slip and call me Mama again, and I didn't correct them. Not anymore. One evening, as I tucked Amina into bed, she looked at me and asked, "Daddy, are you still fighting Mama?" I smiled. "No, sweetheart. We're learning to share." She nodded thoughtfully. "Good," she said, yawning, "because Mama says we both got lucky. We have two mothers instead of one." Her words pierced me softly, like sunlight through old curtains. I sat there long after she fell asleep, holding her small hand in mine. For the first time in months, my heart didn't ache, it expanded. Because love, I realized, isn't meant to be owned, it's meant to be lived, even if it changes shape. But peace never stays forever. The next morning, I received a letter, official seal, court crest, final custody decision. My fingers trembled as I broke the envelope open. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. I carried it to the kitchen because that's where I always open news, good or bad, near the warmth of the stove where life still smelled like onions and cardamom, not fear. I slid it open with a butter knife. Inside, a single page. The court seal pressed deep into the paper, like a wound pretending to heal. Custody of minors Ali Rahman and Amina Rahman shall be granted in full to biological parents Hamza Rahman and Nadia Rahman. The petitioner, Mrs. F. Rahman, shall be awarded visitation rights 1 weekend per month and designated summer holidays. The court acknowledges her significant role in the minors' upbringing and recognizes her contribution to their welfare. It was a small mercy disguised as a sentence. Recognition, but not belonging. My eyes caught on that last line again and again. Acknowledges her significant role. It sounded official, but empty, like the government thanking you after taking your land. That evening, people started coming by, not to comfort, but to collect pieces of gossip. Shazia from across the lane came first, her dupatta fluttering like curiosity itself. "I heard the decision," she said softly.
eyes darting to the court seal still on the table. At least they respected you. They said such nice things in the paper. I smiled. Yes, they respected me right out of their lives. She sighed, awkward. You know how these things go. The law is the law. Law doesn't raise children. Love does. She didn't argue, just patted my shoulder, murmured something about Allah testing his strongest servants, and left with a look that said she was already thinking how to tell her cousin. By sunset, half the neighborhood knew. People stopped me on my way to the mosque. One woman said, "Stay strong, sister." Another whispered, "Maybe it's for the best. Children should be with their parents." I wanted to ask, which ones? The ones who left them, or the one who stayed? But I didn't. I just smiled because silence protects dignity better than argument ever could. The next weekend, the children came, for the last time before the new arrangement began. Ali held a small notebook under his arm. Amina carried her doll, the one whose dress was frayed at the hem. They both seemed older somehow, like the world had told them a secret they couldn't yet understand. We spent the day cooking together. Amina mixed dough with her fingers, laughing when flour puffed up onto her nose. Ali helped me cut vegetables, pretending to be the chef. The kitchen filled with our old music, spoons against bowls, oil hissing in the pan, and laughter echoing off tile. I wanted to freeze it all, the smell, the light, even the mess on the counter, and keep it in a jar for the lonely days ahead. After lunch, we sat on the porch eating guavas. The air was still, except for the sound of distant azan. Ali said suddenly, "Mama says we'll start a new school next month. It's bigger. She said we'll visit you after exams." I nodded, forcing a smile. "That sounds wonderful." He frowned. "But it's far. We can't come every week." "I know. But we'll call. And when you come, we'll make all your favorite things. Halwa, soup, maybe even those burnt cookies you love."
But life, in its quiet mercy, gave me one more moment, the kind that makes all the waiting worth it. It was Eid morning. The house smelled of sweet rice and sandalwood. The children were with their parents that day, so I was alone, adjusting the lace on my dupatta before prayer, when the doorbell rang. Outside stood Ali and Amina, dressed in matching white. Behind them, Hamza and Nadia smiled sheepishly. "Surprise!" Amina shouted, holding out a box of sweets. Hamza stepped forward, voice trembling. "Ammi, we wanted to celebrate here first." I blinked, unsure if I was dreaming. "But the city?" "We came last night," Nadia said. "Ali insisted we start Eid where it all began." Ali grinned. "Because the best Eid food is Dadi's food." I laughed, a full, honest laugh I hadn't felt in years. They filled the house again, shoes scattered by the door, laughter echoing through the kitchen, Nadia helping me fry samosas, Hamza setting up plates the way his father used to. At one point, Amina tugged my hand. "Dadi, can we pray together?" So we did. 4 generations worth of love in one small living room. The living and the remembered. When I said Amin, tears blurred my vision, and I felt my husband's absence beside me, but also his pride, somewhere unseen. After prayer, Hamza came to me with a folded envelope. "Don't worry," he said, smiling. "No more court papers." Inside was a simple handwritten note. "For Dadi, our second home, this house will always belong to you." At the bottom, 3 signatures: Hamza, Nadia, Ali and Amina. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just held the paper against my heart, the same way I used to hold Hamza's letters when he was little. "Thank you," I whispered. But what I meant was, "I forgive you. I understand you. I love you still." That night after they left, I sat by the window watching the last of the fireworks fade behind the hills. The air was thick with the smell of sugar and rain. I thought about the years I'd spent fighting to keep what was never mine to keep, and how in the end, love had found its own way home. Maybe that's what motherhood really is. Not ownership, but endurance. Not control, but continuity. We mother the world for as long as it lets us, and when it moves on, our love lingers in the spaces we once filled. Sometimes I still find one of Amina's hair clips under the sofa, or Ali's doral half torn in a drawer. I don't move them. I let them stay where they are, little echoes of belonging. Because even when life erases us from papers, it can't erase the fingerprints we've left on hearts. And mine are everywhere. When I tell this story now, people often ask me, was it worth it? All that fighting, all that pain? And I always smile, because love that demands proof is never wasted. I didn't get everything I prayed for. The house still feels too quiet sometimes. The evenings stretch longer than they should. But when I hear the phone ring and Amina's small voice say, "Dadi, guess what I learned today?" I know I didn't lose. I just learned to love differently. Maybe you've known a love like that, one that asks you to let go so it can breathe. Maybe you've been the one holding a family together when everyone else forgot how to. Maybe you've stood in a courtroom, a kitchen, or your own heart, trying to prove that what you gave was real. If so, I see you. Motherhood, fatherhood, grandparenthood, they are not titles, they are acts. They are the quiet things no one claps for. The sleepless nights, the meals cooked from nothing, the prayers whispered for someone else's safety. I used to think being a mother meant keeping my children close. Now I know it means teaching them how to walk away without fear, because they carry your strength in their bones. When you love someone deeply, a part of you becomes invisible, woven into their courage, their kindness, their laughter. You don't have to be mentioned in every story to still live inside it. So if you're listening to this and your heart aches from being forgotten, remember this. No paper, no court, no signature can erase a love that was written in sacrifice. I often sit by the window now, watching other mothers and grandmothers pass by, and I wonder what stories they're carrying quietly inside them. Maybe you're carrying one too. Would you have done what I did? Would you have fought? Or would you have let go sooner? Tell me in the comments below. I'll be reading every word. And if this story found a place in your heart tonight, don't forget to subscribe, share, and keep listening. Because sometimes the stories we tell are not about winning or losing. They're about remembering that love, even when erased on paper, always finds its way back home.